All right, welcome back to Growth 101. This is module 4, and this is where we look at building your first growth dashboard. And so this is really where once your growth model and your financial model and your IO models are done, remember, those are all forward-looking kind of projections. Once that's all done, now you're ready to build your reporting structure and your initial growth dashboard. And so this is where you really move from that model to reporting. That's where we take our model and we build out all of the inputs and key metrics that drive success. And then finally, we report back on that through a set of key metrics that we track over weeks and months and years. So things to think about here, and this will take you a little while to figure out. I'm going to go through it relatively quickly, but think about this for a little while with your team. What key metrics actually matter to you and your business? What impacts growth? You want to look at two things: leading and lagging indicators of success on a monthly basis. Remember, revenue is almost always or always is a lagging indicator. You had to do a bunch of things likely before you got revenue. Things like site visits and email captures, those are probably leading indicators of success, right? So you want to look at both of those. Just know which one impacts the other one and what's leading and what's lagging. And then you want these metrics, again, when you're reporting back, to closely match your IO metrics that you had set together. So your IO metrics really formed that forward-looking projection on a more unit-to-unit basis, and your reporting is going to report back on a lot of the stuff that you were doing through those activities. So common growth metrics, again, top of funnel, it might be views or visits or clicks or click-through rate. It might be cost per click. At the EPAG or endpoint acquisition goal or product view, it might be downloads of your app, email captures, free trials. And on the revenue side, it might be new subscribers, it might be purchases, it might be subscriptions, it might be something else, right? I like to look at this on a weekly basis, and you can ask yourself some questions worksheet style here. So what's most important from a marketing perspective? What's most important from a product perspective? What's most important from a revenue perspective, right? So you can kind of use this type of worksheet, get with your team, understand what those leading and lagging metrics might be, and then get to work. This is a view of a simple growth dashboard. And so when I look at this growth dashboard, what I'm really looking at here are columns that show weeks over time and rows that show all the core actions that I'm tracking. And so you notice I've got weeks with top of funnel marketing metric, an EPAG or product metric, and then revenue metrics. And then I've got all sorts of other things thrown in here as well, including full conversion rates and other conversion rates. I've got my spend and I've got my CAC, and I've got notes. And I'm going to go through this in a second to show you what these highlights mean. But if you look at reporting on a weekly basis, in ritualized reporting on a weekly basis, you'll come up with kind of verticalized views of weeks that look something like this. So in week 1, I got X number of website visitors. I got Y number of trials. There's a certain percent of visit to trial that I can start to anticipate. I got 7 new subscribers, 35% trial to subscribe rate. I churned 1 user. That means my weekly churn was 14%. And I have 6 subscribers by the end of that week. My new revenue was $1050. My total revenue from subscribers was $900 this month. Maybe there was some transactional revenue built in there. And then my conversion rate, fully looking across from visit to subscription, is a little bit less than 1%. And then you build it out over time. You layer in your spend. And so I spent $1,000 in week 1 and 2. I spent $1,250 in week 3 and $1,500 in week 4. And my customer acquisition cost started at $143 and then it ended at $83. You as a founder want to be able to rattle off these metrics to your team, your investors, but most importantly, you need to understand what this all means and how to make sense of all of this data. What you want to get to is a point where you can start to spot trends and start to correlate basically what's going to happen if you do certain things. So the items here that are highlighted in yellow are good, positive things that have been impactful on my business. The things in red are things that are less positive. They might be negative. So I'll walk you through a couple examples. And notice at the bottom row, I've got a notes row that just lets myself and my team capture very, very, very high level notes on the week so that we can start to understand, well, what drove these issues or these successes that we had along the way. So looking at week 7, we saw a 45% week over week growth. Well, what happened there? We added related posts to articles and we started Twitter advertising. Okay, well, in that same week, our trial to subscriber ratio dropped. We were averaging in the 40s, 35.71, and then we dropped to 28, stayed at 28 when we started doing Twitter ads. Like that's what you could probably correlate there. And then the churn the next week after we ran a bunch of Twitter ads tripled. So what does that tell us? That means that we probably brought in unqualified traffic who were willing to kick the tires and do a trial subscription. But the second they started getting their credit card hit, they churned out for whatever reason, right? So these indicators are what's going to help you make smarter and smarter decisions as you go. Conversely, you can see that the items in yellow, you can see that in one case here, I have 100% of traffic now getting the new email modal. And that led to a much higher visit to trial ratio because the visitors on the website they're already leads. They're starting to learn about us. And if I capture their emails, I can get to a higher percentage of trial for them. This is just in a hypothetical SaaS scenario, for example, but the same metrics hold true regardless of what business type you have. If you've got a marketplace, you might have two of these types of dashboards. One might be a supply side and one might be a demand side. You may be wondering, well, should I be reporting this stuff through Mixpanel or Segment or Google Analytics? Yeah, absolutely. You should do that. But every week I'm going to manually update my growth dashboard because it forces me to own my metrics. You have to own your metrics. If you don't know what's working, how to correlate the success or failure based on certain things that you're doing and spot the trends, then you're just going to get lost in the shuffle and you're not truly going to understand how to scale your startup. So by doing these manual reports, collect the data and all the other third parties, but track it manually and look at it every single week and ritualize that. Every single week, I'll look on Monday morning to see what happened the week before, report on that week's findings, share that with your team. For me, this is every Monday morning that I do this. And in fact, we'll do a team meeting every Monday morning to look at what happened over the prior 7 days in the business from a growth metric standpoint. There's a dummy spreadsheet with dummy data that you could download here included with this lesson. So I would urge you to do that and play around with the numbers and try to plot it over to the metrics that matter for you. And then we'll continue the program in the next module where we're going to start to talk about customer acquisition and all the great stuff that comes with growing your business.